Hello and welcome to the Learning and Design Mastermind Vodcast that explores several topics in the instructional design field. I am Daisy Barreto, your host, and with me, somewhere on screen, is my co-host, Sherry Conklin, and I'm glad to be your guide as we cover instructional design topics in our podcast sessions. In each episode, we'll discuss the latest trends and practical tips from professionals in the field that can help you deliver optimal learning experiences. Here with us today is Tom Baynes, and an MIT alumnus. And Tom, could you please tell us a little bit more about, your journey, from when you graduated from the program to your current position right now, and then also what is it that you do on a daily basis for our viewers out there that are watching this session?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Bretta. So I do want to give a little background. So I was a staff member at UNCW. I was part of the graduating class. I believe it was 2021 from the MIT program. Um, so I was a staff member at UNCW. The point I want to make is that I actually took 4 years to complete the program because I was attending as a staff member, and they were able to give me one class a semester for free. So I took a long time to do it, which was great. My wife and I had some children during the time, so I took some time off. Um, so I was essentially coming from a background in concert production. I had not explored the realm of instructional design or technology or project management, and became interested in this program and fell in love almost immediately. Um, and as I said, I sort of took classes slowly and eventually graduated and began um, searching for a job. So at that point in my life, my wife and I actually she had just had our second child, and we were looking to move from North Carolina back up to our home state of New Hampshire. And I was ready for a career change and all of that. So what I ended up doing was a bit unorthodox, maybe not something I would recommend completely. But I decided to sort of just leave my current position and start freelancing as as whatever I could do in the field of instructional design. Um, so I ended up building an online portfolio. I actually learned how to create a website, um, built a portfolio with the help of the MIT faculty as far as what content to include and how to organize it. Um, and then got heavily into job searching, and I can get more into that later. I got pretty lucky and found somebody actually through Facebook who sort of took me under their wing, who was a freelancer as well, and she sort of showed me the ropes and got me some clientele, and I did that for about 6 months while I searched for a job in New Hampshire because we were in the process of moving. Um, and again, I'll expand on all of that experience a bit later, maybe. But so we ended up moving to New Hampshire. I was still freelancing, and the job I'm at now sort of fell into my lap. We were actually on vacation in New Hampshire at the time, and um, I got a phone call. I had applied for the job and ended up interviewing and going in to on site. So the job's at Dartmouth College, and wound up with a job, and it all worked out great. I don't know if that's normal, but that's sort of the path that I took. It was a bit scary, but my current role, so I'm at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. I work for the medical school there, the Geisel School of Medicine. And I work for a relatively I work with a small team for a public health master's program. So I am essentially my position was new when I was hired into it. There was a single instructional design manager there at the time. She's my supervisor now. She's amazing. Um, so my role was sort of created. I was hired, and I help her basically in a nutshell, support Canvas, the learning management system Canvas, for a master's of public health program. The program actually has two tracks. One of them is a hybrid track, which is mostly online, and then the other is a residential track. So students are there on campus in person. Um, So I'll get into my role a little bit at Dartmouth. Um, Going into it, I was not a Canvas expert, but I am very into technology in general. So I went for it and it turned out great. I essentially support faculty and some students in their design and development of their Canvas courses. So, like I said, there's two tracks. Some folks are using the Canvas course mostly online, and so a lot of my attention is built on that. Is a lot of my attention is on the build and how to deliver the content online. And then, for the other track, the residential students will use it more of a, an information repository, a resource sort of thing. They'll still submit assignments and whatnot. It's used for grading, but it's a bit different. Um, so I spend a lot of my time solving problems, um, taking care of things that come up at a moment's notice. Oh, I should have mentioned. So I work hybrid. I'm at home. I'm home probably 90% of the time, which I love. I go to campus about 3 times a year. They do like an on-campus intensive session that I'm there for. But mostly I'm at home and get to work from home in the comfort of my office and manage, help with with my kids. And my job is very flexible. They're really great that way. Um, but sort of back to the nuts and bolts. So I work a lot with faculty. I'm on a sort of cycle where we put out Canvas courses every term. We're on a 4-term schedule. So a lot of what I'm doing is either pulling people into meetings and getting things ready to go, or doing the final things and publishing a course and then looking towards, the next course. So it's a big cyclic action. I'll stop there. If there's more you want to know about my role in detail, please ask.
You. And I think we can delve into more of that, especially as I guide you with the questions. One of the things that, as I was hearing you saying, and I just wanted to see if you wanted to expand on anything, because I think you touched base on this, but my next question to you would be if you can expand what inspired you to pursue a career in instructional design, especially as a non-traditional student. And then you mentioned the transition process, and I don't know if you can talk about maybe what were some major challenges that you face in that transition process, what were if in hindsight, if you could give advice to anyone, right, here's some of the things that you really need to pay attention to.
Sure. Um, Dr. Brenner, what was the first thing you said? Sorry, I started thinking about the last thing.
The first one was just what inspired you to pursue a career in instructional design as a non-traditional student?
Sure. So full disclosure, I started taking classes because they were available. I didn't know what I was getting into, right? I got inspired by the content in the classes in the MIT program. And I could talk about this for a long, long time, so I'm going to try to be succinct here. There were some really key moments in the program that, were inspiring. I think, and actually, Dr. Conklin, it might have been in one of your classes. Did you teach the project management class, or maybe you still do? So I remember, I think it was in that class, learning about systems thinking and just essentially the idea of a system and how you have input, you have tools and resources, and you have an output. And it's the manipulation of those tools and resources on your input that will garner your output. And that idea, that simple concept was just really enlightening, because it's essentially like how I think and how my brain works. And I never really realized there was a name for it, so to speak. Um, so that was really inspiring. I have always been focused on learning in general. I loved loved to learn. I always loved learning, as a younger person, and still do. And um, I really I really like to share what I've learned or facilitate somebody else's ability to learn something. Um, Watching that light bulb go off is just really fulfilling for me. So so inspirationally, the program really led into that I was able to really cultivate that skill set. And um, my thing has always been trying to stay in a field or an area that I already am passionate about. At UNCW, I was working with student affairs. Campus life is what it was called. So student focused, right? I was overseeing a student staff. I was um, just involved in the overall well-being of the student population, something, I'm interested in, want to do. So when I found this job at Dartmouth, I'm in public health, which is a similar sort of, community-based field, right? People are there not only to create a good product, but they're there to help out each other. So, throughout the program, I was able to realize that, like, oh, I can take what I'm learning here and I can apply it into another area where, I already have an interest, or some, another area I want to see some progress in. So that was inspiring. There was one other thing I was going to bring up about this. So this was sort of my first exposure to a full-on project plan concept. I learned Addy for the first time during this program. So gaining an understanding of that, like how to take something from beginning to end, how to start with your making sure that you are conducting an analysis before you move on, right? One of the biggest things that stuck out to me was, I think it was Dr. Pastor who mentioned it, was, people will bring a problem to you and ask you to resolve it. And you must analyze the situation to determine if that is actually the problem, right? And I see that every day, honestly. Somebody wants something to do a certain thing and they think it's because of one thing when really, it's because of another thing way in the background, right? Um, I could talk about that for quite some time. So the inspiration in the program really for me was like, this is a blueprint for learning. This is essentially a blueprint for creating knowledge, understanding the concept of, taking information in and being able to utilize it to generate knowledge. That understanding has really, really stuck with me. What I keep coming back to is communication. It's all about effective communication. Because now that I have children, I've really learned this very well, is that you can't just tell somebody something and expect them to know it and learn it. You have to gain their buy-in. You have to get their engagement. You have to, do all of those things that we try to do. So that's kind of where my inspiration came from. I hope that answered the question. And then you had asked about my transition. So I'm 43 now. So I graduated in 21. So I was late 30s. So like I said, it was non-traditional. I took a long time to go through the program. One thing I struggled with was, I started the program, it was in person, and you transitioned to the asynchronous delivery method while I was there. And that was tough for me. Today, I'm all about it. But then it was like, wow, it was just so hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that, I'm going to get information, I'm going to have to, you know, process it on my own and complete the work on my own, right? You have faculty there and they're accessible, but you're not going to class every week. So I struggled with that a bit. What else was I going to say? So the transition between careers was a little daunting. Um, I was not very confident in my abilities coming out of the program. Looking back, I feel like I really should have been, and I would encourage students in the program to do their best to give themselves the benefit of the doubt coming out of the program. One thing I wanted to mention was, I didn't realize that all the projects I did while I was in school were my work, and I could utilize that in my portfolio. You know, kind of dawned on me. I think someone mentioned it to me. I was like, oh yeah, I could certainly do that. Um, you kind of don't really know how much you know until you're in a situation. You're like, oh yeah, I learned all this. Um, and one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned during this call was that you know, I sort of came out thinking things would be cookie cutter in a way, like they would happen exactly as we learned, you know, like I'd go into a meeting and I explain how I wanted things to happen. Everyone would say, okay, that sounds great. We'll do all those things and we'll do them on time and, you know, everything's perfect. And then, you know, it all just goes smoothly. It's so different than that. You're really 90% of the time you're managing relationships between yourself and other people or between other people. Um, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent on that, but um, that was something that was a little frustrating when I, you know, sort of started freelancing and I was like, well, how come people aren't just doing what I tell them to do? You know, um, you have to learn how to build relationships and sort of work with folks to find the best mutual solution. It's never perfect in my experience. So I'll
No.
stop there because I feel like I can just keep going.
No, Tom, I think like, those are great insights. And I think like, even you mentioning about like, that confidence, I think like, once you graduate, from the program, even though you have the knowledge, is that imposter syndrome that I think like a lot of people feel like, I have this knowledge, but you feel that you're not, you have a master, like you're not like, I have all the knowledge and everything. So I think, but you do because you have had the experience, to go through the process of building that artifacts, like, all these projects throughout the program that you can showcase. Here's what I know, and here's how my knowledge fits there. And another thing that you're mentioning that I thought it was very interesting is about the relationships, and that the whole notion that when you are in a classroom, right, is different than the real world, because like in a classroom, you are you have a semester, right? Like you have that semester where things need to happen, and then you need to be finished by, the end of the semester. Working on a real project, it might not be like, 6 months. It might drag around, and then having that knowledge, and knowing that things will shift, and being flexible, when things shift. And as you mentioned too, managing people, it is very key, as part of that process.
Yeah, we try really hard to have systems in place and stick to those systems to manage that volatility in working with people.
So
Correct.
could you describe that system that you have in place? Because I think a lot of our students would benefit, since it's the one thing that's very hard to teach, are those soft skills.
Yeah, sure. And so this is, you know, obviously my unique experience. Um, so I'm trying to think of how to say this. So I came into a situation where the person I currently work for, who I think is fantastic, and I can talk more about, you know, workplace dynamic and things like that if we want to go there. But she essentially built the system herself. And she was coming from a place of, I believe she has a master's in education. So not necessarily specifically instructional design or technology, but very well organized, very detailed. She really did not miss much when she built this thing out. And I wanted to say that because it's not, like I was kind of saying earlier, it's never black and white. It's never exactly what you learned. It's always going to be some interpretation of that, and you have to figure out how to work with it. So I just mentioned earlier, we kind of work on a cycle. So we have all of our processes outlined as best we can. And it's mostly between my supervisor and I because we're really our own little team. Um, so we have to, I'm trying to think of how to approach this. We take a Canvas course. Typically, the course exists already, and we will copy that course into the new term Canvas shell. We'll make our sort of boilerplate updates to the, you know, dates and language and things that we can do without talking to the faculty. And then we'll work with the faculty over a 6-week period to get that course ready for publication. Then we try to publish at least a week prior to the class starting. Okay. So my supervisor has built out this process. You know, we have a meeting at this time. She used an Excel spreadsheet, you know, to determine our basically our project timeline. for each of these things. And so it all works really well. It is quite simple. And coming into it, I was really able to make some subtle changes that were really that were noticed. I'm trying to think of a way to put this. Because she didn't come from a strict instructional design background, although she had really crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, there were some very simple things I could do to create process improvement. I really love process improvement. I love taking a look at how we do something and finding the ways to either increase the efficiency or improve the actual end result, any of those things. So I'm trying to think, how detailed do you want me to get about this process? Do you want to know what tools we use and how we go about that? Sherry?
Yeah, how are you avoiding these potentially volatile or, situations?
We do our best. We approach every situation with a goal in mind of, my supervisor loves to use this analogy of, we are building a plane. When the plane is fully built, then we fly the plane. We'd really prefer not to start flying the plane before it's completely built, because faculty will notoriously be late when you ask them to have their content to you at a particular time. And so what we end up doing is half publishing the course. So we'll publish the course, but only the first 3 weeks are available. That's sort of an example. We really try to hold people to that standard. Now, the faculty I work with are on such a huge spectrum. You will have people who are so very well prepared. They have everything ready for you at your very first meeting, and you can absorb it all, do all your work, get it done, and you don't have to think about them again. Then you have others who won't respond to an email, and you have to chase them down for 3 months. And then it's 2 weeks to publish date, and they, all of a sudden their lack of planning becomes your emergency, right? So it's all over the place. And I've had to really make a conscious effort to not let that get to me, because I am a bit of a perfectionist. I am, time is important. And if you're wasting my time, I'm not really okay with that. But you can't really think about it that way. My job is to publish that course. And really that's the end result. I mean, really the end result is I want to make sure the students have a good experience. So I have faculty who, are extremely well prepared. I have faculty who will ignore you to the very last minute, and then you have to scramble and get your work done. I would say probably 70 to 80% of the time, people get their stuff in on time, and we're able to stick with our processes. But actually 10 minutes before we got on this call, I published a course that was supposed to have been published yesterday. They were supposed to have their content to me last Monday, you have to sort of, you have to work with them because you want to make sure that you maintain their buy-in in your process, or whatever part of your process they're buying into. I have one faculty member who insists on using Google Docs for students to write papers and revisions. And he was previously teaching an elective, and there were only 4 or 5 kids in the class, and we sort of let it go. That's fine. You can do your own thing. We'll manage that. That's not a big deal. Well, he just got pulled on to teach a required class, which will be to the full cohort, which is about 50 students. And I have to put my foot down and tell him, look, I'm really sorry, but we're going to need to work this way, not your way. So far it's been over email, and he has a tendency to sort of ignore what you said and just continue working. But we'll work it out. I have the program director on my side, I have my supervisor, and I have the person who hired him, that I can reach out to if I really need to. Most folks will work with you. And actually, it's kind of funny because he's one of the only ones who actually understands what an instructional designer or instructional technologist would help with. So we could have a really good thing, but I need to get around his barriers of how he likes to work. And these people are some of the leading scientists or researchers in their field. They're teaching the books that they wrote, basically. So you have to mitigate ego a little bit. You have to sort of give and take to get what you want, or something close to what you want. I think that's the biggest takeaway is, you want things to be this absolute perfect learning experience, but you're going to have to settle for something a little less to just to make it happen.
Those are great insights, Tom. And I think, one of the things I was going to say is we're getting close to our time. So I was told that I have one more question for you, and then from the array of questions, that I had selected for you, I'm just going to choose one. So it's being difficult. So we're going to have you come back
I'm all about it. Let's do it.
So one of the things, and I think this is going to be, I know that it's not going to do a nice follow-up on what you had mentioned, but I think especially for, new instructional designers or someone that has just, got out from school and then they're searching for jobs, can you talk about what strategies work for you, and maybe what are some tips that you can, share with others as they plan to build their portfolio, in what ways they might need to be thinking and designing, so they can get that job that they want, right?
Do we have a hard stop at 12:30? No? Okay. So I've been thinking a lot about this actually as this interview was coming up. I was doing this in 2021, right? So just after the stay-at-home pandemic order, a lot of people were transitioning into the field. So I guess my point is, I think things have changed. Things were changing as I was doing it, and I think things have changed considerably since then. I just want to put that out there. With the advent of AI, the interaction of doing this, the actual how you approach trying to find a job is probably quite a bit different, or going to be very soon. That said, I still think there are some things I can share. So how do I want to approach this? So as I was getting ready to wrap up the program, I was sort of going through this battle of do I want to be a designer? Do I want to be a developer? Do I want to try and be an evaluator? Do I want to be a Canvas tech? And I guess what I would say, to keep this kind of short, is that don't pigeonhole yourself into one of those things. Because you may not really figure out what you want to do, or you may not even know what's out there that you could be doing. I fell into the freelance thing. I found this person in Texas who was great. I ended up building content. She has a child with Down syndrome and is running a website that just is essentially an advocacy website for kids with Down syndrome. And I ended up building a short course for her in Articulate Rise on how to do at-home learning with your Downs, with your child who has Down syndrome. Some tips. It was very topical and very applicable. And man, that thing went right on my website, right on my portfolio. And it's the first thing I show to everybody, who asks for an example of my work. So, and I fell into that. And I was at that point in time, pretty not very confident in my abilities, but, you gain a little bit of experience, you're going to have some failure and you're going to have some successes. And then I would just say, don't sell yourself short, try to maintain confidence when you can, and learn from your mistakes. So I kind of forgot where I was going with that, Dr. Barreto, but
No, No, and that's okay, because I think, like, I remember the project that you worked, because I think that was part of your capstone. And I
That's
was,
right.
yes, and then I was one of your committee members, and I remember seeing that, and then it was amazing what you had created. And I think, like, also the how you design that, and I think, like, so this is me, interpreting what you're saying is like, one, um is not to be too concerned about, am I box A, B, C, or D? Because you do have all these skill sets that you're building, but also being willing to try, because I think, like, you put yourself out there to really try. Okay, I'm going to create this, I'm going to work on this, and then really paving the way for your career. And I think, like, my other question to you was more about, like, the portfolio. And I don't know if you could just, like, say what were some of, like, key things that you did, that you think, like, if I were to build a portfolio for myself, what should I think about?
Sure. So I really wanted to have a digital portfolio, something online. So I ended up creating a website. And essentially what I did was I, had an introduction on the website, and then I had a link for a portfolio, and then a link to email me, so to speak, and then a link for a resume. The portfolio is three different categories. It's e-learning, graphic design, and instructional design. Okay. And I think the suggestion was actually to make it e-learning, instructional design, and project management, but I did not have any project management content at that time. Now, so that's what I did. I created those three buckets, and then I put all the work I had done at UNCW in the program into those buckets. Now, that was not necessarily an easy task because, well, for many different reasons, but that is how I approached it. I wanted folks to see that delineation between those things. And I'm telling you, like, my graphic design folder really had some very simple things that I built in Illustrator. They were my projects in the course, in the program. So, but I wanted it digitally. I wanted to be accessible digitally. I wanted to be able to send people a link, because I wanted to show my technical prowess, so to speak, right? It was very important to me that the website was polished, and I don't mean complicated. I just mean it was simple, but it functioned properly. It flowed nicely. I utilized Squarespace. My visual design skills are not that great, as much as I want them to be. So I really took advantage of, like, the template approach, and sort of had to fit what I wanted into that approach, and just make sure I showcased anything I could get out there for people to look at. The way I would show a project is I would, here's my portfolio, you click on e-learning, then it might list the projects with a short blurb for each project so that people aren't having to, like, read an entire project plan. Then I gave them an option, like, if you want to, you can click here and read through the whole project. You can click here and see a short clip of the whatever it was, that type of thing. So, you learn in the program about content delivery and how to, simplify your approach to someone who's looking at your stuff. So I would just keep it simple, utilize those categories to break it up, and accentuate your skill set or your prowess or whatever it is that you may be already, exceeding at, or whatever skill set you may have. If there's a way to showcase that and what you're doing, what you're putting out there, I would take advantage of that.
No, that's great, Tom. And this is just me wrapping up what you've mentioned, because I think even some of those skill sets that we feel like, oh, this is not my forte, but, like, as you mentioned, like, you created something, like, you're sharing that, like, you have a level of understanding of how you use this to, right? Like, if it is Photoshop, Illustrator, Articulate, Rise, Captivate, any of those tools, and as you mentioned, putting that out there, providing your future employers to see what you have created, you get more of a chance to get a job if you're not showcasing what you have created, right? So I think like, this is me, like, just learn from what you're saying. It's like, you really need to show, and then of course, highlighting what are the skill sets that you feel more confident in and more, and that is your forte, that you want to make sure that people understand, like, I have all this skill set, but this is really the skill set that I strive.
Yeah, and what's important to you in your job. Like for me, work environment is critical. I need to be very comfortable. I don't want to be stressed. The front page of my website is a picture of me and my family, right? Because that's the vibe I'm going for. I mean, for lack of a better term, I think it's really important to stay true to yourself, or at least, hang on to what you're passionate about, because you can end up in a job where you're miserable. You might be making the money, but in the long term, I think it's more important to be happy doing what you're doing.
Yes, that's good. Because one of the other questions that we're not going to be able to do this time is the work-life balance, So maybe this can be something for the next time that we have you around.
Yeah.
So I want to go ahead and thank you so much for being here and to share with us a little bit more about, like, your journey, what you've gone through the process and what you learned. I think like this is extremely helpful for others that are out there, either if they are current students or recent graduates, or they're just in that process of transition in careers and some of the things that they may think about and considering. So I really want to thank you so much for all your insights, and also thanking the people out there that are watching this podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me.